For this paper, you guys are going to be developing an argument with quite a bit of length to it to reach that minimum 8 pages. So quotations, paraphrases, summaries, any kind of reference to your sources is going to help you strengthen your argument and also increase the length of your paper. One thing that students often run into trouble with in this paper is that they may make claims or ideas that aren't supported by textual evidence. So returning to that topic idea of college students having a lot of debt and the government paying for college for students. If I say that, college students are dealing with a lot of debt, or college student debt has gotten out of control. I mean, these things are true, but I need to have evidence to back that up. So I need to go find a source that tells me average what the debt is for college students in general, for individual college students, maybe a quotation or a piece of data, maybe a statistic that shows how that college debt has grown throughout the years. Bringing those other voices will support that claim, so I can clearly see that what you're saying is true. So anytime you're making a claim like that, you need to support it with evidence. As a rough guide, you probably want to use at least one source in every body paragraph. Obviously, the introduction and conclusion, you could bring in information from sources, but it's not necessarily required for those two. But every body paragraph should use at least one source, potentially more. You should probably have at least one summary, paraphrase, quotation, and again, probably more, but at least one per paragraph. And also, you want to make sure you're balancing out the sources that you're using. So you shouldn't have, 80% of your in-text citations be from one source. Try and vary it up so we're bringing a lot of different voices into your paper. Now, there may be one or two that you use more than the others, and that's okay. But again, just making sure we're seeing some variety with your source use. So you have a very balanced argument and a very balanced analysis of your topic. So in connection to that, I want to revisit the ways we can bring sources into our papers. I know we've talked about direct quotations, paraphrases, summaries a lot already this semester, but I want to revisit the idea one more time, as it will hopefully help you effectively incorporate your sources into your final research papers. So here on this screen, I've got a quotation from a scientific article, an academic journal article. So I've got, again, this kind of long quote here. I've made an infographic, which I'll share on Blackboard, that takes that information and then incorporates it into a paper 3 different ways. So if I were to summarize that quotation, I might have it look something like this. The study found plants grown in Martian soil ended the experiment with more biomass than Earth or lunar soils. Earth soil performed better than lunar soil with most plant species. Plants in Earth and Mars soil had similar growth rates. So again, I'm not giving those specific numbers. I'm keeping it very general, but you still have a sense of what that quote said after I've given the summary. Then I put in my citation, Mamalink et al., 2014. If I were to paraphrase that quotation, I would get a little bit more specific here. So again, I'm bringing that actual statistic, approximately 79%. I changed the 11 of 14 into a percentage. The plant species had a higher biomass in Martian soil. Soil from Earth and the Moon often have similar biomass, but this experiment found 9 plant species with higher biomass in the Earth's soil. Plants grew at a similar rate in soil from Mars and Earth, but Mars soil still yielded a higher biomass, both above and below the surface of the soil. So again, I'm keeping all of those ideas from the original quotation, but putting them in my own words, simplifying that language quite a bit. And then for my quotation, I've taken some of the phrases from that quote and I've actually shortened them a bit, because again, I don't want to use that whole paragraph. I just wanted to kind of focus on the main ideas. So hence I've got that ellipses there to show I've removed information. So again, these are the 3 different ways you guys can think about bringing your sources into your papers. Summarizing the idea, paraphrasing the idea, or quoting it. Oftentimes with numbers and statistics and scientific findings, it can sometimes be easier to just do a direct quotation, and again, that's fine. I think direct quotations are very helpful. You again just want to make sure you're having a good balance between your words and the words of the authors from the sources you're using. Okay, and then connected to that, I do want to give you guys a few tips and tricks about quotations. So for APA, we have the difference between short quotations and long quotations, which we briefly talked about a few weeks ago, but I want to return to in a little bit more depth here. If I were to highlight my quote once I put it into my paper, I can see at the bottom of my screen here that is a 39-word quote. So in this case, it's all good. It is acceptable to have in a short quotation form. If it's less than 40 words, we do it as a short quotation. So this is an example from a student paper who was talking about healthy food in lunchrooms, how we need to improve the amount of healthy food available in lunchrooms. So we want to think about quotations using something called the sandwich method. So we've got our signal phrase, which announces to the reader that we're going to move into a quotation. We can kind of think about that as the top slice of bread. And then our quote is going to be the insides of that sandwich. So the meat, the cheese, the lettuce, tomato, pickle. And then we end with our bottom slice of bread, our analysis or explanation of that quotation. So here, we've got this quote that tells us that banning junk food and having healthier food led to students scoring higher on English and science tests. And then again, we've got some analysis of the idea, the fact that nutritious food enhances the ability to focus, retain information, and stay alert. And the academic benefits make it clear that healthy food belongs in America's school lunchrooms. So again, we're kind of bringing in some explanation, explaining why that quotation is relevant. In this case, the student ended the paragraph, but they could continue on. Sometimes you are just going to kind of put a quote and you may have a little bit less explanation, or maybe quickly followed by another piece of information from a source, and that's okay. But again, making sure that we're adding explanation, adding analysis whenever appropriate to explain why that quotation is fitting into our topic. We don't just want to throw a quotation in or a paraphrase and then just kind of continue on without explaining how it connects back to our topic. We always want to end a paragraph on our own words. So again, if we've got a good piece of data to bring to the end of a paragraph, just make sure you're offering a sentence or two of analysis afterwards to connect it back to your ideas. We have a long quotation then, which in APA is 40 words or longer. You are allowed to have 2 long quotations and you need to have at least 1. So again, here I have another student example where this particular student was arguing about Puerto Rico being a state and how it should be granted statehood. So she's going along in her paragraph, and then she has this longer quotation here. So just like the previous example, she starts with her signal phrase. Usually when we have a long quotation, we kind of end with a colon. You're not required to, but often it just makes it a little bit more formal and more clearly shows us that we're moving into a long quotation. You could, though, also have a comma there. So we've got the difference with our long quotation, right? A short quotation needs to have those quotation marks around it. For a long quotation, we remove those quotation marks, and only for long quotations. So as you can see, there's no quotation marks around this long quote. We also tab it over 1/2 inch. So that's equivalent to just 1 tab on the keyboard, just like you do if you were making a new paragraph. So usually that means you have to tab over the first line, and you may also have to press tab on the second line. And then the other big change with APA long quotations is that we don't put the period at the end. We do put the period or other punctuation before the in-text citation. So in all other cases with short quotations, that period always or punctuation always goes after the parenthesis, after the in-text citation. With a long quote, we reverse that rule and it goes beforehand. And then theoretically, you could have had, Herlihy Mera. The author's last name could have been in the signal phrase up here. It could have said, as noted by Herlihy Mera, 2017, and in that case you wouldn't even have an in-text citation at the end. You would just have it up in the signal phrase there. Either way is acceptable. And if you did have a page number, that would go here if the author's name was up there. And as you can see, since this is part of the paragraph still, the next line, we don't move that over. That kind of stays left aligned. It's not tabbed because, again, we're continuing with the rest of the paragraph here. And when you have a long quotation, don't just have it in there just to have a long quotation. Make sure it's an actually useful piece of information because especially with a long quotation, you want to spend a little bit more time explaining it, incorporating it into your essay. You wouldn't want to put one of those in and just have one sentence and move on to the next idea. You want to spend some time really weaving it into the structure of your paper. Finally, I want to talk to you guys about how you can alter quotations in order to make them work for you. So let's say you've got a lot of longer quotations that you want to include in your paper, but it's over 2 of them. So you know you have to kind of pick and choose. So instead of, kind of rejecting that information, you can break it down into smaller chunks. If we look at this quotation from a student who is writing about abuses of prescription drugs in the pharmaceutical industry, we can break this into smaller pieces because this is going to be longer than 40 words. So in this case, I would need to break it into 3 to get them all to be short quotations. And then I could put my own ideas and words in between them. So this first piece, I might add the fact that this mechanism behind opioids explains why so many people abuse these drugs. Then I could say, furthermore, chemically these medications are very similar to heroin, which was originally synthesized from morphine as a pharmaceutical in the late 19th century. Heroin is extremely addictive, and again, opioids are going to follow a similar pattern, or something along those lines. And I'd have my in-text citation again. These properties confer an increased risk of addiction and overdose even in patients who take their medication as prescribed. Again, I'd have my signal phrase in my in-text citation. And then maybe I would say something like, which makes opioid addiction a serious problem that needs to be addressed in the medical field. So that's one way I can do that. I can choose to break it up into 3 smaller pieces there, put a sentence or 2 of my own words in between, and then now I can use all that information, but I don't have to format it as a long quotation. And again, it's still giving me that good support from that source. So that's one of your options, is breaking a longer quotation into smaller ideas, putting your own words in between. You also, though, could keep that quotation like that for a moment. And let's say you're kind of looking around and you're like, I really don't need this middle part. So we're just going to delete that. So in that case, to show that we removed something from the quote, we're going to put 3 periods or an ellipses. Again, that tells my reader, okay, the author of this paper has removed some of the information that's in between that source. And let's see how long this is. It's still probably too long. 43 words. So I'm going to take this importantly off. When I remove a word at the beginning or end, I don't need to put those ellipses because, again, you can kind of jump your quote into whatever part of the sentence you want to. We really only need these ellipses if we're removing something in the middle of a sentence or in the middle of a paragraph or between lines. And if I wanted to make it the appropriate length, I could delete that opening phrase too. So we can use ellipses to show that we've removed information in the middle of a quotation. But let's say I wanted to add a little context, or I needed to maybe change the word formatting to get it to fit with my sentence. We also can add things to quotes. And when we do that, we're going to put square brackets around any information we add. So let's say I really wanted to add some emphasis here for, maybe these addictive properties. Put the word addictive in there. And now I've kind of put those square brackets around it that tells my reader that's a new word that I've added to the quote. And you could do more than one word. You probably wouldn't want to put like a whole sentence or anything, but a word or two would be fine. If you needed to, again, may change that verb tense for some reason, you could put activates. Or if again you need to make it past tense for some reason, you could just kind of symbolize a letter there with ed. So these are some things to keep in mind when you guys are adding support and textual evidence to your final research papers. Grammar lesson number 6, which you can find in module 9, has a sort of cheat sheet for doing in-text citations in different formats. So again, if you're kind of struggling with signal phrases or in-text citations, please take a look at that. And remember, you get to do at least 1 long quotation, maximum 2 long quotations if you need it. So again, try to really use those short quotations, but you do want to have at least 1 long quotation to get some practice incorporating that into your writing.